For anybody who doesn't know the history, the whole family school truth campaign started out. It was a guy by the name of Kenny Fingerman and then another guy, Jon Martin-Crawford. Jon Martin-Crawford was actually the first person to kind of take on activism against the family school.
Jon Martin-Crawford is a former program participant at the Family Foundation School, where he spent almost 2 years as a teenager. John is currently working towards a double master's in English and secondary education and is also working with the Community Alliance for Ethical Treatment of Youth, hoping to shed light on the troubled teen industry.
First, I would like to thank the chairman and the committee for the opportunity to present my side of this story. After watching the hearing back in October, I was truly inspired by the clear case of morality that brought together both sides of the aisle on this discussion.
Yeah, he took on activism against the school, which very early adopter of that. And then I think Kenny had the idea of trying to use the internet as a way to convince people to stop sending their kids there and potentially force the school to come to a better place or close. They kind of needed somebody to be a bit more of a mouthpiece for them. And at the time, I had the time, resources, and was able to get involved. This was back in 2009, 2010. That kind of fell apart 2011. But I think at that point, the damage was already done.
And how did you get involved?
Facebook. Initially, when I left the school, I was very much in shock and couldn't fully process what I had just been through and what I'd experienced. But I would say within about a year, I kind of wrapped my head around it and was like, all right, this was bad. This was really bad.
Yeah.
Could have been worse, but it was bad. And once I realized that, I was like, all right, let me see where I can fit in as far as doing something about this place. My initial efforts were very early on in Binghamton. When students would leave the school, I would do what I could to help them, because like a lot of students wound up in Binghamton, and I had some connections with the YMCA because I lived there for like 8 months, and a lot of students ended up from the family school living at the YMCA. And so like the social workers from the YMCA would reach out to me if they wound up with a kid from the family school, and I'd come out and try to help them, basically to make sure they didn't have to go back. A lot of people may not realize, but it was very difficult to leave that place, because they would convince your parents that providing any sort of resources to you would ultimately cause you to recede back into your old behaviors.
Yeah, and die like that. Because my experience was that Mike and Roxy had called my mom and said, if you take her back, then she's going to die, because I walked whenever I was 18. They stayed outside of the payphone in Hancock and were just honking the horn at me and were like, are you ready to come back yet? And, I was never going back. No way. Like once I was out, I was done.
Yeah. In my case, the really fucked up thing was they kicked me out, but they still gave my parents that same spiel. So
Wow.
It really put me between a rock and a hard place at the time. But I was very fortunate and ran into the right people at the right time, and it worked itself out.
I got there in October of 2001. When did you get there?
I got there January 7th, 2003, and I left May 1st, 2004. Up until the point where Jon Martin-Crawford spoke in front of Congress, it was, okay, I'll do what I can. As far as I was concerned, I did not see a way forward in my life situation at the time. And there was kind of a realization when I saw Jon do what he did, that there was a framework in place through CAFETY and through what they were doing. So the truth campaign was started as a Facebook page. The way it got started was Jon spoke in front of Congress in 2008. 2009 was when Kenny started the Family School Truth Campaign Facebook page. And at the time, I was not involved in it in any sort of capacity, but I had a lot of time on my hands at that point and would often look at the comment sections on posts and would see people try to minimize what happened at the school. I would just respond to people's comments and very often would shut them down.
I remember that. Oh, I remember that well. Oh, yeah.
That was my initial involvement. At a certain point, they planned on meeting with Rita Argyros, Rick Reeves, and Jeff Brain.
And when you say they were going to meet with them, who's they?
So initially it was just Kenny. Kenny somehow had caused enough commotion to where they were like, let's see if we can get ahead of this. So he reached out to Jon and asked Jon if he would be willing to be involved in this as well, if he'd be willing to meet with these people. And Jon's response was, I'll do it if Emil does. That was kind of how I got pulled in. And then They kind of had me do outreach. Like if they wanted to get a student's testimony, I'd reach out to them and try to get them to speak to us.
How many testimonies would you say were on the Truth Campaign site?
30-ish.
Ranging from the 80s all the way until when you guys were doing it.
It was very interesting to see the evolution of the school. It was almost like the staff were like snake and we had defanged them, but they were still snakes. Like I actually went to the school to meet with them September of 2009, and they kind of showed me around and were like, "Oh, see all these changes we're making." It was very odd. It was almost like a neutered version of what we had went through.
Nobody who was attending that meeting on behalf of the Truth Campaign was out for a pound of flesh.
Kenny was willing to do anything just to damage the school, and that was a major reason that I remove myself from the equation when it came to the Family School Truth Campaign. The thing is that it's interesting. The way that we were abused was rather specific. And like, for example, I was reading an article about the Paul Gear trial, and there was an alumnus who arrived after I did. And they were talking about kids being wrapped up in blankets. That didn't happen during my time. That was no longer the case. So like, why are you talking about this?
Thank you.
It happened. You're hurting your credibility.
Thank you. Exactly. The truth is bad enough.
Yeah, you don't need to do that. Like that doesn't help. That's hurting, not helping. That would be just an example of the sort of thing that would be allowed. And when that started happening, I spoke up against it because I said, listen, it has to be the truth with a capital T. It has to be like the hard truth. And if we see a testimony that's not accurate or that we know couldn't have happened, no.
Like integrity is right. Of utmost importance. Yeah.
And Kenny basically said, I'm gonna let these sorts of things slide because they hurt the school. And I said, okay, well then I'm out.
That is very much my experience with another alumni who is very out front in all of this stuff. It's not about the truth. It's about vengeance by whatever means necessary. And I'm just not about that. So I can totally relate.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were at the forefront of everything up until 2014. And then you kind of, from my perspective, you were like, okay, you know what? I'm done with this. Like I've done everything that I'm going to do with it. The school is freaking closed, largely due to what you and Jon and Kenny were doing.
The people that were the worst to me, for the most part, are dead. Robin and Mike Ducey. Those two were my primary abusers, and then everybody else was almost kind of like an accessory to them. There are still staff out there. I mean, specifically Jason Garner, Tommy Cummings, Bill Musgrove, like who were certainly abusive, but for the most part, they were acting at the behest of Robin and Mike.
Doesn't make them any less culpable, for sure. You know,
sure. But to me, it's at a certain point, it's like I don't know that I have any recourse legally. I've already done what I needed to do as far as the school went. It's over. And then on top of that, my life today is good. And I wouldn't have what I have today if it wasn't for that. If I hadn't gone to the school, I wouldn't have wound up being in Binghamton. If I wasn't in Binghamton, I wouldn't have wound up meeting my wife. If I didn't meet my wife, like so much cause and effect. I don't have the energy or the headspace to feel about this at this point. Being involved in what I was involved in, I needed to do something back to those that did to me.
Yep.
That's I felt the need to do that. I felt the need to strike back at those who struck me, and I did. And there you go. Like as far as the Paul Gear thing, it's been very interesting to watch. It's opened up a lot. One thing that's very interesting to me is seeing the amount of people that are waking up now. It's like there's a mass awakening.
And I thought that was like a really cool part of it.
Well, I mean, they had their chance when the school was still open.
They did, but whenever you said that it was only a year after you went to that school that you figured out, you know, this was bad. It took me so I got sober in 2012 and I did my very first fourth step, and the family school was nowhere on it. Like I had talked about the family school. Oh yeah, I used to have to eat dry tuna on an English muffin. Used to have to say, hey, my name's Annelle, I'm on blackout. I'm on blackout with boys. If you see me talking to a boy, call me out. And when I get to my fourth step, nowhere on that resentment list is the family school, because it doesn't even occur to me that maybe I didn't deserve that. So I feel like that the awakening that's happening now, because I have talked to a lot of alumni. There's this thing that we do and compartmentalize things and just, okay, yeah, it happened. It was weird. It was crazy even and abusive, but I can't really focus on that. I just quit talking about it and I buried it. And it wasn't until the New York Times article came out that I actually started really talking about it.
Which New York Times article? There've been a few.
September 2018.
Mattazimi?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, the thing was, I never betrayed myself. They tell me, okay, you need to be honest. Okay, I'm being honest. Oh, but you need to say you did this, but I didn't. But you need to say you did, but I didn't. Like that was essentially the
Well, that was the
dynamic.
conformity they were looking for, you know?
They wanted a conformity that was a betrayal of self.
Yes.
And I wasn't able to do that. I didn't know what to do. And so I got there, and the first thing I did was I was like, all right, I guess I'll start going to meetings, and I guess I'll find religion. I didn't know what else to do. And it was in that situation that I was able to wrap my head around what I had just been through, because specifically the people that were most willing to help me had their own perspectives on what I had gone through. They helped me see the full spectrum of it.
And where are you from? Because you're not from Binghamton.
I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
So can we just like rewind for a second? Because you said that you were going to meetings. Did you go to the family school for a drug or alcohol problem?
No.
No.
The meetings were very therapeutic for me, and I was able to stay level because of them. Maybe it was the wrong place for me to look, but it worked itself out.
What else did you have to pull from?
That's exactly where I'm at mentally with it. It's like, it was interesting when I moved back to Cleveland, when they learned that I was not a drug user, they were like, "Oh, what are you doing in here?" I just kind of stopped.
Those principles are useful. You know, they bastardized the program over
Oh yeah,
at the
absolutely.
family school. Yeah.
Again, the most interesting thing to me was sitting down with my sponsor. You know, because I got somebody as a sponsor out in Binghamton. Sitting down with him and kind of talking to him and talking through what I had just gone through, and his response, I mean, it was perfect. What you went through is not what the program's about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like talking about all these different things that the family school's preaching,
Oh yeah.
and he's just like, what? No.
That is one of my biggest qualms with the family school, because I do remember whenever I walked into rehab in 2012, and I had this visceral reaction whenever they said, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. And that's because I would have to stand up at the table and recite how it works word for word to get regular food. I try to understand why there are so many of our friends who have passed away. And I just wonder if sometimes when they walk into, whenever they walk into a meeting wanting to get sober, and then they hear these things that were weaponized, because it definitely took me back out several times. I was not a drug addict before I came to the school. And that was like one of the things that Jan would use against me, because I would not say that I was an alcoholic. I would not say that I was a drug addict, because I wasn't. And after having to repeat how it works hundreds of times for regular food, I finally conceded to the fact that I was an alcoholic at the time. And so whenever I left the school, in order to get away from all the nightmares and the stuff that I had just gone through, I went the opposite way. I didn't go run into meetings. I went to cocaine, and freaking alcohol, because they told me this is what I was going to be anyway. And so what was it that I was missing out on? And then whenever it was time to get sober, it was so scary, because I might as well have been up at the table. Whenever they started reciting it, it was just like a reaction within me,
Honestly, I tried so hard to comply with them that I truly believed that that was my path to success. I was 17 and a half. I turned 18 that summer, and then I stayed. They kicked me out. And honestly,
did you get your transcripts? Did you get any credit for going there?
I don't know.
I called back to Millie after I got back home to
Mhm.
South Carolina, and Millie said that because I didn't complete the program, that it was as if I was never enrolled in the family school.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I almost like this is almost like what I was talking about before about the fact that I can't even be mad at them. I had such dismal grades in high school.
Okay, yeah, and I didn't go to school. I did not go to school.
Right. So
Yeah.
I had such shit grades that if I had relied on my high school career to get me into college, I don't know that I would have gotten into community college.
Touche. Touche. You see the amount of alumni that are now that are now speaking out, have not
Mhm.
said anything in all these years.
Mhm.
And I've seen an overwhelming want to feel better with somebody with the experience of getting the closure that you have been able to get, right? Like, do you have any words of wisdom?
Be real about what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the end of the day, like you said, the truth is bad enough. You don't need to make shit up. You don't need to describe things as it wasn't. And perhaps most importantly, they can't hurt you anymore. They gone. So whatever you have to do to move past it, do it. If doing activism right now is going to help you, then cool. There was a moment for me when I arrived at the school to meet with them representing the Family School Truth Campaign. This was again September 2009, and for me that moment gave me so much clarity and so much closure.
Can you talk about what happened in that meeting?
I mean, it was just basically them being like, please stop, and me being basically saying, sure, if you issuing a public statement addressing what they've done in the past, firing,
Their reason for not being able to do that.
they would have gone out of business if they would have opened themselves up to lawsuits. I get it. The thing was we weren't exactly reasonable about it. We were putting them between a rock and a hard place, very much on purpose. But I mean, me personally, I would have completely backed off of them if they did what we demanded they do. Firing staff that is known to be abusive, specifically Paul Gear, the Duceys. It was a fairly comprehensive list.
What's your opinion on Jason Garner being a Broome County representative?
I think it should be revealed where he worked in the past. I think people should know how he treated kids. That reporter had reached out to me and she had asked me if I'd be willing to do a Zoom call with her. I told her that I would do it. I mean, I'll talk about him gladly.
Yeah, she's been on it. She asked me about it, and I can't really speak to it just because he was my
Right.
U.S. history teacher. He wasn't in my family or anything like that.
He honestly just seemed to go out of his way to torment me when I was there. I don't know if his constituents were aware of his past, if they would be so eager to have him work for them.
So, is there anything that you want for people to know?
You went through what you went through. It sucks. Your choices are you can suffer or you can not suffer. I think it looks like something different for every person. I think that different people are going to have different kind of arcs. I mean, personally, from like day 2 onward, I was, up Shit's Creek without a paddle. It was funny. I only brought one person up at the table once. It wound up backfiring on me. I wound up getting in trouble somehow.
I remember coming to Family One with one of the Family Two girls to bring you up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
Like that annoyed me to no end. I was like, why? What the fuck? And it was one of those things. Like I was just an easy target because you could accuse me of anything
And they would believe it.
they believe it. For whatever reason, Robin and Mike really didn't like me from day one. They just did not like me. And every opportunity they got to make sure that I was aware of the fact they didn't like me, they took. And I was like, all right, don't know what to tell you. It sucks that you don't like me. I wish that wasn't the case.
Yeah, because it didn't make any sense.
Right.
It did not make any sense.
But again, I mean, for me, it's what's done is done.
How do you think, if at all, it impacts you today?
Makes me harder to break mentally.
Amen. Same.
It makes me more sensitive to other people. It also, I think, has reduced a lot of my ability to sympathize. I don't really do the whole sympathy thing. Like, I'll do empathy all day, but I'm not going to do sympathy.
So what do you do now?
I run a small factory and I'm a martial arts instructor.
Family one. Mike and Robin. Oh yeah.
Delights, both of them.
Yeah.
I'd like for them to be able to see the fruits of their actions. It would have been a lot more fun if they got to watch.
All of this.
Exactly.
I was very happy whenever Jan Cheripko died. I'm, again, not somebody to normally celebrate the death of someone. He had been told by his attorneys like not to talk to me and things like this, which is totally fine. Dude, go to your grave with that shit. But that deposition that he left right before he freaking died. Have you read that, by the way?
I kind of glimpse. I saw a glimpse of it.
Oh, that deposition. Wow.
He
Wow.
threw Paul under the bus pretty hard, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely he did. Absolutely he did. And I feel extremely vindicated in that whole situation just for the simple fact that the case that he was deposed in is a case that I took to attorneys like, and you know, hey, you don't want to talk to me? Fine. Leave a deposition, leave a 243-page deposition for everybody to see where, you know, yeah, he was still deluded about his part of things, but
well, very few people are going to understand the impact they had. They don't want to.
no, because could you imagine? They would never sleep. They would never sleep.
I met with a handful of staff
Yeah.
after leaving the school, and for the most part, they had delusions about their part in that school.
That's my experience too with the staff. Yeah.
There was one couple that worked in Family One that I met with. They actually seemed to internalize what they had put us through. I mean, like, the husband broke out into tears and was like, "I'm so sorry." My impression of this couple was that they meant well.
We were both students there. I don't think we ever had a word between us.
No, because
Never.
I wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to.
I saw you a lot. I knew exactly who you were, you know,
but I was standing in the hallway the entire time.
Exactly, with no shoes on. Yeah.
Everybody had their personal devils at that place.
Oh yeah.
Like every single student that went there.
Every student is pretty much different. Like,
yep.
We do have some that are mostly in common. Like the majority of us have this several kinds of people or whatever. But for the most,
like I don't think a single student there like Tommy Cummings. I don't think a single student there like Paul Gear. I don't think a single student there like Mike and Robin Ducey. There were people that were commonly disliked by the student.
Absolutely.
Because even if they weren't personally abusive towards you, you certainly saw their behavior.
You saw it.
You saw how they acted. You saw their general vibe. I think generally speaking, people like Jimmy K. I think generally speaking, people liked Randall Carnahan.
Oh my gosh. Did he ever reach out to you before he passed away?
I don't think so.
He sent me a message and he said, "No, I've been thinking a lot, and I've been thinking a lot about the school. And I was wondering if I ever did anything to harm you while I was there." And, you know, I told him that he was, you know, such a light in a dark place.
He sent me a similar message. He said, "It's going good, living in Vegas, working and playing a little poker on my off time. I've been going down an FFS memory lane trip. It started with John Blauvelt telling me Ryan Steffi was on Facebook, which eventually led me to you. I was there sincerely to give back and try to help. However, I still sometimes wonder if I did good or harm."
That is certainly an apology.
And that was in 2009.
All day.
That was in 2009. He sent me that message.
2009. Yep.
Yeah, Randall Carnahan was, I think, somebody that was generally well liked by students. I was not in class. Like, I was in class so very rarely that, like.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, I mean, the one thing that was interesting to me was two people that I think were kind of unlike Chris Stein, Terry McCarthy, both seemed to kind of have my back, which was interesting.
That is interesting.
Which was interesting. There was a handful of staff that were decent to me that I think were generally indecent.
Absolutely.
Whereas there were staff that most people don't seem to have a problem with that I was like, what the fuck was wrong with this person?
Yep. one of my worst staff members, freaking Marie Scazzari.
That's interesting.
She put me on no condiments for 14 months of my life because I was a big kid. And she loved food sanctions and, putting me on all halves. And that was just,
Their use of food was sinister.
oh yeah, cruel.
Like their use of food in particular, of all the things that they did, I almost feel like that was the worst. God forbid them fucking with your food, fucked with how you behaved. Oh, now you have a food issue. Now you're a food addict.
Yeah. Now you go to food group and now you have to turn around whenever you're at the scale, which, I walked in there as a 270-pound, 16-year-old girl. So, I mean, the second that I got in those doors, I was on all halves and I was punished and my weight was used against me from day one.
I mean, that sounds like a thing they would do. When I left there, I almost feel like I had an eating disorder initially
Yeah.
because I was so in the back of my head was so worried about somebody coming and taking my meal from me.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
they
kind of
didn't teach me anything. I had lost over 100 pounds whenever I was there. Whenever it was time for us to get weighed, I would have to turn around. I couldn't see what the number was on the scale. And they used it for my mom, like, oh, these are the results that we're generating. Look at how much weight she's lost. Meanwhile, I was barely eating and all halves for a, oh God. Yeah, that was cruel. And as soon as I left the school, guess what happened? Because I had no guidance whatsoever, I packed the weight right back on.
Yeah. In my case, I get there and they immediately just start putting me on like alternative food, try to break me.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're doing it so often that I lose like 20 pounds after I get there. And I was already not a husky boy at that point in time.
Right.
So I lose a bunch of weight. They're like, oh wait, that's not good. So they put me on doubles.
Right. Oh gosh.
It's weird that like there are people that went there that were very happy with their experience. I don't get it, but
hey,
good for you.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
One thing I do find interesting is watching people co-opt the early activism. Like I was hearing that the way that the trial went, they were trying to talk about somebody that was really not involved in the Truth Campaign being the front person for it, which I thought was bizarre. Like I thought that was very interesting. Whatever they needed to do to be happy.
Hey, yep. Like
My
that is
my thing is, I mean, if it comes down to it, I'll put my name out there if it helps expose Jason Garner. And if any of the other staff that personally fucked with me, if I have an opportunity. But otherwise, I mean, I'm not interested in being out there.
Do you have any feelings about the verdict?
Good.
Yeah, good.
It's not new information to me.
No.
I've been hearing about Paul Gear probably since like 2008.
Yep.
Like
This
that's
is
when I
not
first
new.
started kind of hearing how much of a piece of shit he was. And so good,
Good.
he wasn't part of my experience there.
Yeah, I was pretty deeply involved in chorus, and it was one of those for me. It was one of those keep your enemies closer type of things. He wanted for everyone to be scared of him. And
Yeah.
looking back, I was 16. I was scared of him, but now I know that he was so unbelievably insecure, and
Yeah.
trying to assert his dominance. And the only people that he could have any control over were kids. Do you realize that he was only 35 when we were there?
I turned 40 this year.
Yeah, he's only 57.
Holy shit. Like he looked like he was in his 40s.
I'm telling you, at least his 40s. I still just cannot believe it.
What a mess. That's crazy. I didn't think about it when I saw it. I was like, yeah, he's 57. He's an older dude. But he's only 17 years older than me. He hasn't aged much from his mugshots.
No, he hasn't.
He's going to age pretty rapidly in jail.
Do you know about the photos that came out in the trial?
I heard about this. The ones they showed on the screen.
Yeah.
I heard about that. That's amazing.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Amazing. That's amazing.
Like, I would never shame anybody over their freaking body or anything like that. But Paul Gear, he got exactly what was coming to him.
Oh,
Man, I'm telling you, karma did
that
not
was
just freaking show up.
honestly, like from everything I've heard about that trial, it was like a Roald Dahl-esque, like it was like something out of like a goofy book.
This,
Like it
you
reminds me
can't
of like
make it up.
it
You can't.
reminds me of like
I was talking
Matilda.
about Matilda earlier just
Matilda.
because like Audra reminds me of
Matilda.
Matilda. Yeah,
Yeah, like it's like a Matilda situation.
it
Like this
is.
guy's court case is just so absurd.
Yeah, like you cannot make this stuff up. And whenever I heard about that happening, and then Diane saying
Yeah.
with all those pictures, she's like, oh yeah, he's got them all in a box in his closet.
Oh, Diane.
Yeah.
I feel like it says more about you than it does about him, lady.
Doesn't it? You heard about Jim Kay, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep, that was great. He was creepy, he was pompous, he was arrogant, and I didn't like him.
I mean, my thing was that it seemed almost good luck winning that case.
Yeah, no shit.
Like how like they did the best they could, but just because of how absurd of a human being he is.
Yeah.
And how
And how
absurd,
many people know the truth.
right, and how many people were there.
Yeah.
And witnessed him at his prime.
Yep.
Like, how are they going to defend him? They were I almost feel like they had to get creative.
They did. I mean, they put those photos on the screen saying that he couldn't have done it. Like, dude, what was that?
That's not how that works. Come on, lady.
Exactly. That is not how that works. And the fact that they thought that everybody else was stupid, like, come on.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Oh yeah, it was really bad. It was really bad.
My thing is I don't have any emotional connection to that trial. He never bothered me.
Yeah.
Like I was in choir for 30 seconds. I got kicked out of choir. It was very I think he brought me up and just screamed at me for a second. I was like, "Sorry, bro. I don't know what to tell you. I don't get to go to school. I have to carry buckets of rocks up and down a dirt road all day."
What a crazy, just a really, really weird chapter in our books of life. Really weird chapter.
Yeah. I always say if it's not worse than what I went through already.
Exactly.
I'll be fine.
Yep, I'm pretty freaking resilient. Pretty resilient, Well, dude, this has been really cool. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Of course.
And congratulations on the new baby and all the things. And yeah, I'm just like, for whatever it's worth, I'm really like very proud of you. Very, very proud of you, for sure.
Appreciate it.